so much, everyone, for joining us for the ePortfolio UNISA, University of South Africa's ePortfolio webinar series. This is the first of many to come, and we are super excited to host Kristina Hoeppner. She's the project lead for Mahara, the open source portfolio platform. Most of you, or some of you from UNISA, you'd know we use Mahara a lot in the past for our ePortfolio teaching and learning. Kristina works at Catalyst IT in Wellington. Kristina, you'll tell us how to pronounce that name there later on, in New Zealand. And she enjoys working with the community of educators like ourselves, learning designers and education innovators in New Zealand and beyond to create positive learning environment. And she's been a member of ABLE Task Force on Digital Ethics in ePortfolios since 2019 and a member of the Executive Committee of FLANS, that is Flexible Learning Association New Zealand, since 2021. Colleagues, Kristina will be talking to us today about the ePortfolio in and outside of the classroom. And we have seen a lot of your questions that you posted when you were registering. And we would love to see how we can, just deal with one or two of those, because there's a lot of questions that we raised for you, Kristina, there. So thank you so much, Kristina. Thank you. Kristina is I call her the champion of ePortfolios. And I think if there was a global award or honor, Kristina, I'll definitely nominate you for that one. So thank you so much. Over to you. Oh, sorry. We are also with Dolly Matavata. Let's not forget Dolly Matavata. Dolly is my colleague. She's also a little bit of my mentee, but she's mentoring me now on how to use technology effectively. She'll be helping us with the Q&A later on. Thank you so much, Kristina. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction, importantly. And thank you also to you, Dolly, for helping organize this session. I'm really excited to have had the chance now to connect with you and to be able to share some of the portfolio practice that I've been involved in for the last wee while, for a few years now. And also to be able to learn more from you, what you would like to do with portfolios and also where your ideas are. And so what I wanted to do today is actually have quite a practical session. Practical in the sense that we are looking at examples and we are looking at ways of how portfolios can be used. And if you'd like to have a bit more theoretical background and also more future thinking ideas and how the portfolio can fit into teaching and learning, then I would very much recommend Empo Entle's keynote from the 17th of June that we've just had for the ABLE Symposium. And so that is a wonderful complementary introduction to portfolios, also looking at it more from the theoretical and also research lens. I see that some people had problems getting into the room. Hopefully they can be resolved shortly. The three of us are going to keep an eye on the chat, so please do feel free to use it. And I will also ask you some questions, so be chat ready so that you can participate. As Empo Entle had already said, I live in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, and Wellington in Te Reo Māori is also called Te Whanganui Atara. And I moved to the Southern Hemisphere back in June 2010, so just a little over 16 years ago, to work for Catalyst, actually, to work on the Mahara project team. Before that, I was at a couple of different universities in Europe and had actually started using Mahara at the University of Luxembourg, where I had worked prior to moving to New Zealand. So of course, my view is very much influenced by Mahara, which is the platform that is primarily developed at Catalyst via the project maintainers and also the core developers. But we also do have community contributions, which is always fantastic to see. And so, of course, my worldview is very much influenced by our community, but I am also involved in the wider portfolio community, in particular around ABLE, the Association for Authentic, Experiential and Evidence-Based Learning, and also ePortfolios Australia, which is the closest to me, just to the west. And so it was really fantastic to actually see that in the announcement that ePortfolios had made, that it said ePortfolios South Africa, because it would be absolutely fantastic if there was going to be more of a movement, which I think ePortfolios and also Norm had kicked off with their book that they published last year, bringing a lot of African voices together along with other members from the international portfolio community. And so before we continue with my presentation, I just wanted to have a quick look at what had come through the questions and also what you were interested in learning more about. And from all the registrations that we've had for this session, there were kind of the top categories were that you were interested in getting a general understanding of ePortfolios, using ePortfolios as an assessment tool, implementing ePortfolios in your own field, and then also how to create an ePortfolio. The first three I am going to touch on in the session. The last one, not quite so much. That would definitely be a session on its own, that we look into a particular platform. And you might also like to explore different platforms and see how you feel about them, how you'd like to navigate them. Of course, I can always very happily show you around Mahara. We've just released version 2604, so our version for this year, at the end of April, which comes with a complete redesign of the platform, making it more accessible and also having simpler workflows involved. And all the other questions here, especially also the question around using ePortfolios as an assessment tool, would also be its own session. So hopefully in the future, we will have the opportunity to give more deeper insight into the individual topics that you are interested in, because I already see a whole webinar series come on, and with a lot of people that have very good insight into all of these topics. Now, what importantly also let me know is that a number of you here today that had registered are not yet quite familiar with portfolios, whereas others have already been using them. So what I'd like you to do now is get ready in the chat and put in at what portfolio knowledge stage you feel you are at. And as a metaphor, I'm using the butterfly life cycle. So the egg is somebody completely new to it. You are here because you're interested, you've heard about portfolios, but don't quite really know what to do. The caterpillar is the person who's been munching away, has been listening to podcasts, has been reading articles, has been listening to presentations, watching presentations, maybe already had a few chats with colleagues. So really just taking everything in, growing, and then getting ready to be in the chrysalis. And that is where all the digesting happens, so where the transformation then happens. Planning activities, thinking more with colleagues, looking at what others are doing, getting feedback on your ideas, so that you're then ready to emerge as a butterfly. And that is somebody who is in portfolio practice. So in the chat, I see we've got one caterpillar, one chrysalis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, X already. So there are definitely a number of people that have not yet worked with portfolios. So it's wonderful to have you in today's session and give you a few resources on hand and a few ideas that you might like to explore. And so how can we use portfolios? There's lots and lots of different use cases for portfolios. And especially looking at it from the Mahara perspective, what we like to do is put the learner into the center of attention. ePortfolios in her keynote just the other week spoke about the portfolio as an ecosystem. And I completely agree with her that the portfolio is not just a thing, but you can use it more holistically and also make it part of your wider learning environment. And often the portfolio is complementary to a learning management system. It really started as a way for students to keep all their learning, because especially about 20 years ago when the project started, learning management systems, our courses in learning management systems were often cleared out at the end of the semester because there was not enough storage or storage was very expensive. So students lost everything that they had done during the semester. And so the portfolio could serve as that place where students could keep the things that were important to them and then incorporate that with their informal learning and then non-formal learning so that they had everything in one place that belonged to them. And that's really also where the learning portfolio comes in. So the learning portfolio is very much about reflection, about introspection and digesting the learning and making sense of the learning. Learning portfolios may not always be shared with somebody else because they can be very personal. Then, of course, especially if we are looking at the higher education landscape, there's also assessment portfolios. And while in the beginning, a lot of people looked at portfolios as these personal learning environments to foster that personal learning, of course, at a university, at a college, at a vocational school, often students are motivated by external factors. And so the assessment portfolio is one way of bringing in reflective practice also into the assessment as an alternative way to the more traditional assessment. In particular, also during the pandemic, portfolios were used as alternative ways to assess people because suddenly we did not have the invigilation available anymore, or not everybody had moved online with their exams. And so assessment portfolios are a good way of not just regurgitating knowledge, but seeing what students have learned from the activities that they have participated in. And we see assessment portfolios in all sorts of fields, and come back to that in a bit. In recent years, we've also seen increasing use of portfolios in work integrated learning. So that's your practicums, be that for the students becoming teachers, for nurses, and also for chefs, for example, or for plumbers. They all need to do a practicum or internship. And how do you stay in touch with your education provider? You can use a portfolio for that, so that you can reflect on your work experience on a regular basis and also share that with the tutor at your institution or even the supervisor and at your workplace in order to then also hear their feedback and incorporate that into your learning. Some of you might, even if you haven't used the portfolio yet or think you haven't created a portfolio yet, might have actually already created a showcase portfolio, or often also called presentation portfolio. Because that is something that is often used for employability purposes, for applying for a job somewhere. Often a resume or a CV is not enough, and we need to demonstrate skills. And that's where the portfolio comes in, because we can have the artifact and then also the reflection going with it, really demonstrating what we have learned and what we are capable of. Now, moving more and more into the workplace, there is then the professional certification portfolio. That is one that is fully embedded into workplace culture. For example, for nurses, for pharmacists, for teachers, for other professions that have a competency framework and where the members of the profession need to demonstrate their competencies or their skills on a regular basis, either annually, biannually, or in other time frames. And so that is also where a portfolio can be extremely beneficial, because we are not just ticking boxes and saying, yes, we've participated in this professional development activity, we've done the hours, we've got the certificate, but with a portfolio, you can dig deeper and you can actually show what you have learned and how you are applying that learning in your workplace. I'm always amazed at LinkedIn when people share their certificate and the certificates do not contain a lot of content and just say has successfully passed course XYZ in 4 hours. And I'm always, well, what does that mean? What was taught in the course? What did they learn? How can they apply that in their workplace? And that is where the portfolio can come in. And it also invites conversations with others. So if you're looking at all of these 5 different types of portfolios now together, you see that they overlap. And that is really intentional, because in an electronic platform, you can upload an artifact, for example, once, and then you can use it in different portfolios and then frame your reflection differently depending on the context for which you create a portfolio. So often people don't just have one portfolio, but they have multiple portfolios, depending on who the audience is and why they are creating their portfolio. And so if you're taking a look at a few examples, and if you have the slides up through the link that I had shared earlier, let me just put it back into the chat again, just in case. Then you will always be on the slides that I'm showing, and you can select the screenshots or the text below in order to see the live examples directly. But at the end, we'll also share all the links so that you have them available, and you'll also have the links in the presentation that you'll receive afterwards. So just a very few examples. The first one here is from a student at Dublin City University. She's studying in a psychology course, possibility studies. Dublin City University has very interesting and innovative degrees that are extremely interdisciplinary. And so this student has created quite a large portfolio, as you can see here on the left-hand side, with the navigation that is included. So a portfolio does not just have to be one page, but you can organize a portfolio into different pages, into different sections in order to guide your viewers through. And so Jessica here works a lot with multimedia elements. She's embedded a video, she's using graphics, and then she's also using text. So that's the fantastic thing about using digital portfolios, that you can make use of multimedia, in contrast to just having a paper-based portfolio where you can, of course, put images in, but if you wanted to make a copy, then that does make it a bit more difficult. Whereas with an electronic portfolio, you have it right at your fingertips. The second example is from the University of the Arts London. That is an art school, and they actually work with 2 different portfolios. So they do have Mahara, and they also have an Adobe product, because all the art students need to work with the Adobe suite and demonstrate their skills in it. And so they typically use that for showcase portfolios, whereas they use Mahara for their assignment portfolios and for their assessment. So really also to show their work products, but also to show the process of how they arrived at their final product, their final presentation. Because the portfolio is a wonderful way of teaching and learning that is very much interested in showing the process and showing progress rather than only an end product. Because it is through that progress of learning that we make sense of what we are learning, what we are experiencing. This third example here is also from Dublin City University again, where the student created a reflection portfolio and very much focuses on the reflection rather than so much not so much on summarizing what she had learned. So if you look at reflection in very simple terms but very effective terms, you could say that the portfolio helps you answer 3 questions: what, so what, and now what. So what is the summary of the activity? So what is what have you felt during that activity? What have you experienced? And then now what is, okay, so what of this experience are you going to take into the future with you? Either by making some tweaks, leaving something out, or trying something entirely new. And so that is a very effective framework with 3 super simple questions that can be employed for any activity that you want to reflect on. Since we are also looking at portfolios, not just at the university level, but also in the workplace, here's an example from Teresa McKinnon, who is now retired, but worked at the University of Warwick, who had done her CMALT portfolio and electronically, and so that she, in this case, could continue to be a certified member of the Association of Learning Technologists. You're not supposed to read the text. I am going to pull out some words, so bear with me. So I really like Teresa's portfolio because she uses portfolio language and also exemplifies extremely well what a portfolio is. Because a portfolio is not your archive. A portfolio is not all the things collected. But a portfolio is a curated list of artifacts and experiences. So Teresa says a highlight of her professional career was. So she pulls out one thing that best demonstrates what she needs to demonstrate here in this portfolio. She also says, the point at which I realized, so she is looking back at her experiences and again, only mentioning one of them, the most salient one. And she regularly revisits. She reflects on her experiences, but it doesn't all just happen by herself because she says that feedback and mentoring were very helpful. So learning is a social activity. She learns from others by them also giving her feedback, her responding to it, making tweaks, and then going back into that cycle. So that's why I really like her portfolio, because there we see very well what the meaning of a portfolio is. And now my question for you, in which study programs or professions do you think you can use a portfolio? Please put it into the chat. You've already heard a few things from me. So we had psychology. I briefly mentioned nurses and teachers, and also we had some professions. So we could also have plumbers or electricians that work with portfolios. And which other, and we had designers. Yeah, which other study programs? Photography, yes. And often it is the creative arts that have already been using portfolios for many, many years, like architects as well. Social work. Then in all programs and professions, as it also becomes a portfolio of evidence on what you do at work and teach. Yes, wonderful. Marketing, para-veterinary professions, environmental management, teaching portfolio for academics. Yes, not just school teachers, but also all of you. We can use portfolios in any subject at any level of study, primary, high school, and higher education. And I would also say further education and in the workplace for informal learning. And you are all very correct. Portfolios are not just something for a small group of study programs or professions, but they can be used by everyone. Some more less common study programs are also musicology or forestry. At the ABLE Symposium that we've just had, we also had a professor from engineering talk about how her students use portfolios. Career services can use portfolios. We've had the showcase portfolios. Career services at a university can help students create those portfolios so that they can apply for internships and also prepare them for jobs or maybe even graduate school applications. Portfolios can also be used in academia. We've had scholars create portfolios as part of their doctorates, either to showcase their doctoral thesis or to accompany their process of going through their doctoral studies. Occupational therapy has portfolios. All pharmacists in New Zealand have portfolios, and every single year they get a new template and work on that and need to demonstrate their skills, need to follow a competency framework, and also document their professional learning. But it is not, and it is also, yeah, plumbers, electricians, hairdressers have been using portfolios because often in a profession, you need to demonstrate skills. You need to follow a competency framework. And just saying, yes, I've ticked the box is not quite so good compared to you actually really showing a before and after picture, for example, of having done a good haircut and maybe even getting the feedback from a client into your portfolio or recording a video of you performing a particular activity so that an assessor can really see what you have done and you can then reflect on that in order for the assessor to know what you're taking of that activity going forward. So lots and lots of applicability for anybody in any field. And so if you're getting theoretical just for a minute, there is a definition that can be used when working with portfolios that is really wonderful because we can think of it as folio thinking. Because what we do is we engage in the process of collection, organization, reflection, and connection. And all of that really culminates in, or distills down to, we are telling stories. And the portfolio is a storytelling tool. The portfolio helps us tell our learning story. And we might tell it in different ways, depending on the context, but we are still telling our story. And we make sense of what all that learning means to us. And by telling the story, we can also relate all of these experiences to each other, and then also engage in transversal thinking and transfer of knowledge in general, so that we make connections between the different experiences. In Mahara, I like to think of it as 5 activities. And thankfully in English, they all start with a C. And you can also apply that to any other, to many other platforms if you like. And so the first activity you do is to create. So you gather, you create your evidence, you create your artifact. And so that typically happens outside of the portfolio platform because of course that is the learning experiences we go through. Then you collect all of that. You gather that, you're a hunter, gatherer, you bring everything together into your electronic space. But that's not yet your portfolio. because the portfolio really comes in when you curate your learning and also reflect on it. And so that is what we had seen in the example from Teresa, where she selected things, where she revisited what she had done, but she highlighted only one thing. And so the curation element is incredibly important because that really helps us distill things down. And then you can have conversations on the portfolio. On a paper-based portfolio, not so much, because you might not want to put comments into the margins of a nice, pristine white page, whereas online you can put comments on. And you can do so at the end of the page on individual artifacts, or also have conversations with people in real life and use the portfolio just as the screen to talk to. But you also have the possibility to collaborate, because you can create portfolios as a group. You can create portfolios together. Dublin City University does that these days quite a bit, where students create portfolios together and then also submit them into Moodle as group portfolios. So they had created functionality around that for Mahara to facilitate that process. So now my question for you is, having heard all of that, the different types of portfolios, you've seen a couple of examples. We looked at the Folio thinking definition, so about the storytelling, looking at your learner story and you as a whole person. Do you think you've already created a portfolio yourself? And I'm especially looking at everybody who had said that they're in the egg or in the caterpillar stage. Because I wonder if some of you might have already, without knowing the term portfolio, created a showcase portfolio as part of a job application. Okay, so we've got some people who have created portfolios already. That's awesome. And if you like, you can also put in what type of portfolio you've created, whether it was a learning portfolio, assessment portfolio, work integrated portfolio, showcase portfolio, or professional development or certification portfolio. So while you're doing that, and here we've got the two options. Oh, we have a work integrated learning portfolio. Fantastic. That's really awesome. I'd like to briefly show you a metaphor, because oftentimes, at least I learned really well through metaphors and analogies that make the unfamiliar familiar to me. And so if you're looking at the portfolio as a museum or as an art gallery, that is an idea that came from Mandy Mentis. She's a professor and specialist teaching at Massey University here in New Zealand. It's really looking at it as a museum. We have the curator in the basement, and that is where all the artifacts are gathered. So everything is neatly organized. And then when the curator wants to do an exhibit, they are not taking everything from the archives and pull that up into the exhibition halls. No, they are curating their collection. They are selecting the pieces that best illustrate the theme of the exhibit. They are also not just putting the artifacts up, but they are also providing additional information. They might write a story around it, why all of that is together. And that is one portfolio room. That is what we are also doing with the portfolio. We are curating over our entire collection, then invite people in to take a look at what we have gathered. We have different types of artifacts. We can also leave feedback in the museum. And some exhibitions might require an entrance fee so that only certain people can go in. And so that is how you can look at a portfolio, that you can have public portfolios that are open to everybody, but you can also share your portfolio more privately in order to only give certain people access, especially, for example, if it is around recertification, where you might also want to share quite personal things that maybe the entire internet should not know about. So think about, when you're thinking about your own portfolio practice, whether you are already using a metaphor, please feel free to share it in the chat, or how you would explain portfolios to your learners. Since we do have a number of people in the room that have not yet done much with portfolios, how can you make a start with it? The important thing is to know why you are doing portfolios. And Shari Bowker, who used to work at the University of Queensland, came up with a portfolio implementation cycle that she's taking, that she took her colleagues through when somebody said, let's use portfolios. Portfolios, while they are, especially electronic portfolios, of course, are a technology, they are more a pedagogy or teaching method than just the technology. So it's always good to know why you're wanting to use portfolios. So you might make your request to your learning designer or at the support staff, hey, let's use portfolios. And so the second thing you should be doing is really discuss your readiness. Have you looked at why you want to do portfolios? Do you know the different types and which one you want to use? How you also want to change your teaching? Once you decide, yes, the portfolio is actually a good way for us to engage students in a class, and that, again, can be any study program. Recently, I started working with an academic in accounting. So accountants write reflections on the readings that they have. So decision is made, yes, we want to use portfolios. Then comes, how do you want to use the portfolios? So confirm the pedagogy, because everything needs to also have learning outcomes. You need to know your why. Once that is established, you can look into the setup. And so that is deciding whether you want to work with templates, whether you want to leave it up to the students. Of course, it also depends on whether you have a platform already available at your institution or if you first need to look for one. And once you have done that setup, and especially if you, for example, are the learning designer and work with an educator, then it comes down to training the educator in using the platform themselves and also engaging with portfolio pedagogy and ways of using portfolios effectively. Once that is done, the educator is ready to teach with portfolios. But that's not where it ends, because then we do need to have a review. So reflect on that, also use portfolio principles to evaluate whether the portfolio activities should continue, should be changed, or whether something else might be more appropriate, because you can't do everything with portfolios. And then, of course, also have support around it. Not that the educators are then left on their own and don't have anybody with whom they can talk. And that can be a colleague who's doing something similar in their courses, or it can also be learning designers. And after that, we are again going back to the decision factor. Do we continue with portfolios? Do we not continue with portfolios? So that is a number of not small activities, but a quick overview of an implementation cycle where each element, of course, has lots and lots of questions. So if you'd like to have a more comprehensive diagram already available with more guided questions, you can use the planning and decision-making guide that the DCOLE project in Germany has developed. And that guide exists in English to make it easy for everybody. So that is also a wonderful guide to have very comprehensive questions and workflows included that you can go through and see what of that you'd like to use on your own. And where else can you find some resources? And how can you connect with the portfolio community outside of Africa? And hopefully in the future, I'll also be able to add some events from the African continent. Personally, I really like free resources. So that's kind of what I'm going to give you right now, because of course your libraries will have books as well, because lots and lots of things are published about portfolios. But here are some of my favorite resources that I like. And so of course, one is my monthly newsletter that comes out every first Wednesday of the month, in which I always share short stories and short ways of how educators use portfolios, and also have event announcements included. But there is also the podcast Create, Share, Engage that I've been running now for a while. We are approaching episode 100 very soon. And there you'll have interviews with portfolio practitioners and researchers, but also students, and can learn from them how they work with portfolios in many different contexts. So we've had architects join, we've had engineering, but also career services, an person working at an internship office, someone who works in the writing center. And so lots of different stories, because I really want to show that portfolios can be used very flexibly and also in many different contexts that some might not think about immediately when they hear the term portfolio. There's, of course, also lots of written resources. Here we do have the book by Empo Entley, Modise, and also Norm Wan, Digital Resilience of ePortfolios During and Beyond the COVID-19 Pandemic, Lessons for the Future, and also a number of other resources, including also presentations from the community on our Mahara YouTube channel and also the Able YouTube channel. So if you missed the Able Symposium that we've held a couple of weeks ago, the videos are already available, so you can go through them and soak up all the latest research and implementation ideas that people are having. But of course, it's not just learning on your own by watching videos or by reading text, but portfolios are very much also about the people and coming together and sharing. Things that Empo Entley had said time and again that she likes about the portfolio community is that we come together. And that is also why I love our community, because we work together, we learn from each other, and then bring that learning to others as well. And so there are the links to the events that we for Mahara organize on a regular basis, Able events that are happening, and also ePortfolios Australia. And so I'd just like to highlight a few of those for you. So on a monthly basis, we have Mahara Ask Me Anything sessions, Mahara AMA. And every other month, it does also work for the African continent, time zone wise, because we, of course, need to look at the global distribution of our community and want to make sure that we offer sessions also in people's office hours rather than always in the fringe hours. So on the 23rd of July, there will be a session at 10 o'clock in the morning for you. Able will have its next event in August that everybody can participate in, and it's the Able Shark Tank. So expressions of interest are due on the 31st of July. So if you want to pitch an idea, and it's not an idea that is then being torn apart by sharks. No, our Able sharks, they are incredibly friendly, because they give constructive feedback and they help develop the idea further. So if you'd like to pitch an idea, and that can be that you're at the very start of your portfolio journey and want to try something out and want to get some feedback, please do respond to our call for participation. And it will definitely be a fun event because we will have lots and lots of puns included. If you are up for a conference, ePortfolio Forum will be held this year in Sydney on the 23rd and 24th of September. The call for proposals just closed for that two-day event. But if you can't travel to this beautiful city, you can still participate because there's also always an online option. So if you want to engage with the Australian community and some international speakers, please mark this event and put it into your calendar. And that's it from me. We still have a few minutes if you have any burning questions that you would like to ask. And I, of course, look forward to also hearing a bit what you're doing and what you might plan on doing, especially also with the ePortfolios South Africa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Colleagues, can we I see that I was muted there for a while. Yes, thank you for the round of applause for Kristina. Kristina, thank you so much for that very, I wouldn't say basic, but a thorough and I don't know. It's not simple. It's not simple yet, but it was everybody, anybody, the eggs, the caterpillars and the butterflies could understand what you were saying, what you're talking about. So thank you so much for taking us through, especially taking us through the different types of e-portfolios. Or portfolios rather, I don't want to take time for our guests to ask questions. So I'm going to stop here and give opportunity for our audience. Colleagues, please, let's engage. Kristina, ask questions, reflect. It's not about asking questions. Sometimes it's just about reflecting and commenting and having a conversation. Thank you, Kristina. Leon, I saw that you were, okay, must we unmute? Dolly, please help there. I see that Leon, okay, thank you. Leon, you were conversing a lot on the chat. Perhaps we want to hear your voice, and think Elna also. I'm picking on you guys.
You see, this is when you know people too well, then this happens.
Yeah,
No, I
you're being
just,
called on.
yeah, you see, the naughty child in the room.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I think you reaffirm so many things that we, are trying to do here at UNISA, advocating for portfolios, because I do think in the open and distance learning environment, it's a much more authentic kind of assessment tool. The only big challenge is obviously our reach, that we have such big numbers of students, and therefore it becomes sometimes impossible to put a portfolio on the table. But I think the authenticness lies in that it creates also adaptive learning possibilities, where a student can truly adapt to a personalized style, a personalized way of doing this. So for me, there's great value. I would just maybe suggest in that path that you did in your process of developing a portfolio, we should also talk about tools. Because I think now with AI and all these technologies coming in and talking about e-portfolio, we need to also incorporate the capacity building of the tools of the trade, so that both the academic and the student can navigate it in a very ethical and responsible way. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Leon, for your questions and the points that you raise. The sheer numbers that you have at UNISA, and importantly shared once with me that she has about 14,000 students in one of her classes, which was quite a revelation to me when I'm usually thinking of large classes being about 500, maybe 1,000 students. And so what we from the able community want to do at some point is have a webinar so that we can discuss how can you do portfolios with such large numbers. So bringing together people to do some brainstorming, some ideation, and seeing what others with smaller large classes do, and see if that could also translate to your size of classes. And then in regards to the tools, yes, when we are talking about digital portfolios, we always use some sort of tools. And these days, a number of the website builders that some people use for their portfolios do already have AI incorporated to make workflows easier or to make layout choices easier or finding good color combinations and things like that. And of course, in the portfolio space, we are also looking at, well, how can we meaningfully incorporate AI? What does it mean using AI for a portfolio? Would students still write their text and reflection? Would they be using AI for that? How can we ensure that students still learn? So those are all questions that are being discussed at the moment. There was a workshop in 2024 already. Let me just find the link to you, and where we had a number of presentations and conversations around how could AI be incorporated into portfolio practice. And we are also having had a number of AI webinars in the able community, and will continue to have more in the future. The next one that we are going to have is for everybody who speaks or understands German, because on the 24th of July, we will have an event with a number of German scholars. And that event will be available in German, talking about how they are using AI already in portfolios and what their ideas are. We will record the session, and then there will be a transcript available, which can then, of course, be translated as well, so that the ideas can also be shared with everybody else.
And that's the beauty of ePortfolio, Christine. There's this culture of sharing among the colleagues. It doesn't matter whether you are in South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, or Germany. There's that free-spirited attitude of sharing resources. I mean, there's a lot of resources that you shared just in this one presentation, and that's something I love about ePortfolios. Thank you so much. Any more colleagues?
Okay,
since you picked on me, it's Elna.
Yes.
Thank you, Kristina. I'm with Leon. We are always talkative and active. Kristina, thank you very much. This was really, really wonderful. I honestly appreciate the links that you send and the resources
You're welcome.
You gave a lot. The reason why I really think portfolios are great for students is that a student can absolutely actively, they can mirror their personality in a portfolio. Where with even the authentic, if I tell them, give me a photo story of a problem in your area or something like that, it does mirror them a little. But a portfolio is really authentic because the student can absolutely mirror their personality. They can make it themselves. They can really go and play. And so that's why students also enjoy this. And this is something that I really am interested in taking part in the big classes where we have high student numbers, how you will do that, because it's not just the student doing a portfolio, they need our support, and then we need to market in some way. And if you have 40,000 students, it's becoming a problem. So the scaling up of that, I'm very interested in how we will do that at UNISA. But Kristina, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. CPD, thank you. You guys are always, it's amazing. We always learn at all your sessions. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Elna. Speaking of personality, I put the link into the chat to this presentation that I'm pulling up here. That was also from a couple of weeks ago by Salsabel Kadura. She is a student. And so what she had done is really make it very clear for educators why portfolios are a good way of also doing assessment. And not seeing it's either assessment or it's bringing in the personality of the student. You can combine those two things so that with the portfolio also you foster the ownership and the authorship of what the students are doing. You're engaging them more in their work. It becomes more meaningful and they learn a lot of skills then that they can take with them. So I do encourage you also to take a look at that presentation, which is such a wonderful resource and gives us really good arguments if somebody thinks, well, portfolios do not work in my particular study area. And yes, I hear you. We will need to have that session for how to deal with portfolios in very large classes. So I'll definitely be in touch with Empoently and see how we can make that happen, maybe even in a partnership between ABLE and ePortfolio South Africa, once it has been funded entirely.
That will be great. That will be great. Thank you so much, Kristina. Yes, there's a question there from Refilo. Refilo wants to know if we can have ePortfolios. Students can use the ePortfolios offline and only upload it when it's required. That is a topic for another hour, Christine. But can you just explain a little bit, the purpose of ePortfolio being online, digitally and available?
Yeah. So Refil, typically digital portfolios are available online over the internet. Simply because then they can be shared very easily. Everybody can have access who's allowed to have access. However, there can be the possibility that you do your evidence collection offline. So for Mahara, for example, we have Mahara Mobile, which is an application for Android and iOS devices. And there you can take photos. You can also already write journal entries. You can, once you've recorded a video or an audio, you can prep it to include it into your portfolio. So you can tag it, you can change the title of the artifact, and then once you're back online, you can upload all of that into your portfolio area to then use in individual portfolios. So that is how we currently see the offline capabilities, because we do know that in rural areas or sometimes also in areas where due to economic reasons, students might not be able to have consistently internet access, that it is important to still have that reflection done in a timely fashion to collect that evidence directly and not wait until a week later or 2 weeks later. But in order to share the portfolio, you typically do need to have it online.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Kristina. Also, it's important to remember that, especially in ODL colleagues and Refiro, that we've got that geographical gap between the learners and the educators, and between, among the learners themselves. And ePortfolios is one of those pedagogical tools or approaches that sort of, bridge that gap and allow that learner-to-learner interaction, learner-to-educator interaction. I'm watching time, Kristina. I know you're very sensitive in time. We are just 5 minutes over. And, colleagues still have your audience, so perhaps we can indulge them. So ePortfolios gives you that interaction, but Refilwe is one of our specialists in the library. She does systematic reviews with confidence and all that. So I work closely with her. We'll have this conversation, but I think it's something that we can have a conversation also within UNISA with other colleagues. Thank you so much. Any more questions, colleagues, comments, reflections from Kristina? And as far as the large class is concerned, I think this is the 100th time that this issue comes up to your face, Kristina. It's no longer a pointless issue. Leon spoke about it. Elna spoke about it. So I think it's time that we do something about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the
No,
colleagues
I
at
do. It is on my list to discuss, so that we can see when and how we can fit it into the webinar schedule, and also, of course, whom to invite. So it would be wonderful to have you, of course, in the room, so that we have the first-hand experience, what you as educators are currently missing, what you're struggling with also in smaller than 14,000 people's classes, and then that we can think collectively about possible ways forward to try out.
Yeah, thank you so much. We can talk about portfolios the whole day, you and I, but let's not bore our colleagues, so that next time we can invite them some more. We have to talk more, colleagues on ePortfolios. We have an assessment policy that include ePortfolios as an assessment tool or assessment approach, that, as whatever you call it. But at the moment, I'm pretty sure that no one is using. I'll be in trouble, but I know that no one is using ePortfolio as an assessment tool. Those modules, those colleagues who have smaller modules, they can start now. Don't wait for us with big modules. Start now, start little. Your modules will never be. It doesn't mean that if you've got 500 students in your module, be like that forever. You never know. You might have an influx, but if you start now, you'll be able to be one of those. Let us know how we scale it up and include more people. So there's a lot. There are many benefits of. And one of the things that Kristina said was that ePortfolios help our learners to make sense of their learning. And for me, it's about our learners. If we can get the learners to make sense of their learning, and the thing about ePortfolios, you are able to include those all types of assessments, Kristina. It can be multiple choice. We call them MCQs at UNISA. It can be an essay type. It can be a collaborative project. It can be whatever. The students can do all these things everywhere else, still experience the world, and come back to the ePortfolio space and bring it together and reflect and make sense of it. So I think we those benefits, I mean, we're talking about collaborative learning, social learning, we talk about self-directed learning, we're talking about student agency, all these beautiful things. I can assure you that ePortfolios has a solution for them. So from my side, thank you. I don't know.
We can't hear you. Your mic keeps on going back.
Oh, my mic is. Oh, Akira,
Yes.
I thought you wanted to say something, but I saw Kristina noting, so I thought Kristina could. All right. Anyway, thank you so much. Any last thoughts? Any last thing from you, Kristina?
No. Apart from, thank you so much for coming along today. And I hope that you will have a lot of portfolio conversations, continue having conversations with your colleagues, or start conversations. And then please do join the worldwide portfolio community so that we can also learn from you and discuss together with you how portfolios can benefit your students and what we might like to try or should try in our own practice. So thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you so much, Kristina, for being here today. And thank you for your presentation. We will share your slides later. And colleagues, thank you so much for staying until this minute, 10 minutes over the set time. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Dr. Maseko, I see you there. Kira Mudisa is my daughter. She's in Germany. She's always following me around. Kira, thank you so much attending all my webinars. Dolly, you are my star. You are my hero. Thank you so much. Kristina, we love you and we appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.